the country is being destroyed without a single bullet being shot. There are no democracies.
No.
Because if there were, we wouldn't have had all the lockdowns. Here in South Africa, during lockdown, we weren't allowed to buy fried chicken. I'm not joking. Sustainable development is essentially the centralization of the entire world. Amsterdam is a beautiful city. It's perfect for a 15-minute city. It doesn't even realize that it set itself up. Saying anti-Semite is the same thing as calling somebody a racist. What's going on in the Middle East is the result of authoritarians who are creating conflict where there doesn't necessarily need to be conflict. I never thought the day would come, right, that I'm going to sit down at my laptop and type in, is Earth flat? And then you end up finding all these weird people who are actually amazing people. I don't want to say simulation, but I think David Icke has a point, because to some degree, a lot of the stuff is just way too well planned. Because if you say that everything is by design, you're completely removing the idea of human nature. Human nature is what's keeping us free.
Hey guys, welcome to a new episode of the Trueman Show from South Africa. This time in Stellenbosch, we're standing right in front of the wine farm called Spear, where I recorded a podcast with Nell, aka Jerm Warfare. And I think it's a really great podcast because we talked a lot about South Africa, about how his life has been up till now, his career as a cartoonist, working for the mainstream media, making a change to the alternative media. And yeah, talking about all this journalist work, about how he views the world, what's going on at this moment, what's going on in Europe, what's going on in South Africa, and how we can learn from all those differences and comparisons as well. So I hope you will enjoy this podcast, but before you're going to watch it or listen to it, please subscribe to the channel where you're watching or listening, Spotify, YouTube. All subscriptions really help. Please share the podcast on your social media or share it with your friends. And on the truemanshow.com, you can do a financial donation, which obviously also helps us making this podcast. So for now, I really hope you enjoy, and please enjoy the podcast. Jeremy, thanks for having us, man. In South Africa, in Stellenbosch.
Oh, it's a great pleasure. Thank you for visiting my side of the pond.
Yeah, man. How are you doing?
I am hot, aren't you?
Yeah, definitely, man. Yeah.
You brought the good weather with you.
Luckily, because in the Netherlands it's winter, and I saw pictures online with people ice skating and stuff. So it's
in the Netherlands.
Yeah,
I just missed it.
Yeah.
I was just there a few months ago.
Yeah. I think it was this year a bit late getting cold, but it was really cold the last couple of weeks. I think I'm already here since...
I don't even know what snow looks like. We don't get that here.
Not at all, right?
Little bit, like in some parts of the country.
The mountains.
But down here, on top of the mountain.
Yeah. So maybe because I think a lot of our guests and viewers, they know who you are, but maybe we can do a quick introduction for the people who don't really know. Because like if you go to your Wikipedia, I think it's always funny to look at people's their Wikipedia pages.
I've got a good story about my Wikipedia page, actually.
Tell me.
Excuse me. I know that it's complete garbage. Like most of it's just fake news, right? But I don't care about Wikipedia. So what I did was, a few times I've asked people to go onto my page and just like really make it rubbish.
Yeah.
Like just say anything and see how long it sticks, because the way Wikipedia works is that if something stays for a few days, then it'll probably stay for a few days more, and after that a few weeks more, and then eventually you can get it to stick. And so people were going on there saying that I've gone from a male to a female Jeremina and all sorts of stuff. But of course it's all been changed back. Yeah. And then I think for a while they locked the page, and now there's like some sort of semi-lock on it. So
people can't change it anymore.
I just want people to troll Wikipedia.
So everyone can go visit your page and try to change it now,
yes,
right?
Yeah. I absolutely approve of that.
Nice. So, like, one of the things that I read on that page, which is probably true, is that you had like a big Facebook page, which got removed by Facebook, hasn't it?
Yeah. I mean, it wasn't massive. I think I had about 60,000 fans, and Facebook took it down. they gave me a few warnings, and I couldn't. The problem with social media like Facebook is they don't tell you what you're doing wrong, so you don't know.
No.
They just say you have violated community guidelines or something to that effect.
Yeah.
But you don't actually know what it is. And they just kept on giving me these warnings, and they took down the page.
Jeez. It's funny how they can control almost everything on that way. I mean, I've got some Spotify removed some of my podcasts. YouTube removed some of my podcasts as well. And then in YouTube, at least, they tell you it's medical misinformation. But what exactly, they don't tell you. But it's always medical misinformation.
I like that though, because that means that you actually are on the right path.
It is, yeah. And once I managed to get one back. I did a podcast with Rainer Fulmich. It was the German lawyer who was trying to, in the beginning of COVID, really try to do something about it. I released a podcast with him. They removed it after a day. And I was so fucking angry with YouTube. So they were like medical misinformation. I was like, this is censorship. And I was like, because you can appeal against what they're doing, right? So I was, so this is bullshit. This is... you have to give the video, you have to give the podcast back because it's censorship and I'm not accepting it. And then 2 hours later, they posted the podcast back online.
What?
So I was like, what? So I was just, because I was like, okay, it's gone, and I'm just reacting my anger out of, and then just, and they gave back the podcast at a certain point, and I was like, oh, it's okay, that's weird. And now a month ago, they removed it again after 2 years.
YouTube?
Yeah.
Well, YouTube took down my channel.
The whole channel? Oh, jeez.
So I don't have a YouTube channel at all. I've got no YouTube presence.
Wow. Yeah.
And Spotify also banned me.
Totally banned you?
Yeah. So they banned me for the first time, I think, in 2021. And I was able to appeal. And they don't tell you for what either, right? They just, same thing, violated community guidelines, whatever. They allowed my appeal, and a month later, my podcast reappeared on Spotify. And then a few months later, gone, like that, taken down, and no chance to appeal. So it's permanent ban.
Jeez.
And funnily enough, and I don't know if it's because of this particular podcast, or if it's just coincidental, but immediately after I did a podcast about whether or not Earth is flat, that podcast.
Really?
Yeah.
Because the things that I noticed, I did some flat Earth stuff as well, and actually the podcast which
I love the topic.
Yeah, jeez, man, it's so fun. It's so fun because one thing is for sure, we are not living on like the thing that's presented us. I don't know what it is. Different, like if it's flat, if it's I don't know, but it's not no.
But just so you're saying, so what happened?
So like on flat Earth, nothing. The only things which always causes trouble is vaccines and the whole COVID story.
Yeah, vaccines. And a topic, a particular event that happened during World War II that you may not talk about.
Yeah, true.
So that plus vaccines.
Yeah,
and COVID, yes.
And COVID, yeah. How did this all started for you? Because like. Yeah, for me, it was a super obvious event with like I owned a couple of companies in the dance scene. So COVID hit and then everything was gone. So that gave me the opportunity to research and then...
Did you say in the dance scene?
Yeah.
As in like dance music, like techno?
Techno, yeah.
Oh, you're a man?
House and techno, yeah, man.
Is that still a thing?
It's huge in the Netherlands.
I thought that died in the 90s.
Jeez, it's huge in the Netherlands. Festivals, 20,000, 30,000, 50,000
What?
people. Yeah, really, yeah.
I thought we moved on from that, like grunge, and like left it behind.
No. It's one of our biggest export products in the Netherlands. It is.
Dance techno. I remember things like deep house.
Yeah.
And, well, I must be honest, I did enjoy sort of breakbeat, drum and bass stuff. I was very big into The Prodigy.
Oh, yeah.
Loved that type of stuff. I don't know what you call that. I mean, what is that? It's not techno.
No,
I don't know what that is, but it's
electronic.
Remember Chemical Brothers?
Yeah. Awesome.
I was into that.
Yeah. Yeah,
Sheesh.
but now it's
We're going
still
back
big.
a few years.
Back a few years.
Sorry,
yeah.
I interrupted you.
No worries, man. But for me, it was like a super obvious event which triggered everything to researching and doing the podcast.
Yeah.
And then, how was it for you? Because you were a cartoonist.
Yes. So my story is very bland. I was essentially a professional cartoonist since 2005. Let's go back even a bit further than that. I'm a varsity dropout. So I went to university and I studied art and I failed art. Let me ask you a question. How do you fail art? Right? Who fails art? Well, anyway, I failed art. And they said, no, you're not good enough. You can't become an artist. And so I became an artist. So
to prove them wrong.
But not exactly immediately after I failed. I kind of went into the corporate world. I just found like some random job that was in sort of mobile technology. And at that stage, there was no smartphone, right? So Apple, the iPhone hadn't really hit the market. It was still phones with buttons, and you'd flip them open. Remember those?
Yeah,
I think that was Sony Ericsson and whatever.
Nokia.
Nokia, yeah. Anyway, so I was sort of working in the sort of mobile technology sector in a cubicle type job for a few years, and sitting in traffic, in and out of into the city and all that. And then I decided, I've always loved cartoons. Like I've always loved cartoons. As a kid, I would draw in my Bible in Sunday school, and I would get up on Saturday mornings to watch Saturday morning cartoons. And so I've always had I will love cartoons until I'm old and grey. I'm already halfway there, and I particularly like the old-fashioned cartoons from the 1970s and whatnot. Everybody loves Roadrunner and Bugs Bunny and Pink Panther and Asterix and all the greats when they were still politically incorrect and they could make jokes that you can't do today. And so I remember in 2005, I decided I wanted to become a cartoonist. I just really enjoyed drawing at night and whenever I could, and I'd scan, and I created a really basic website, and I would upload it there and send the link to my friends, and that's great. I can't wait for your next comic strip, next week and all that. And so that's what I did. And I started enjoying that, and I thought, well, what if I send this to a newspaper? Maybe they'll publish it. And that's what I attempted to do. And so around late 2005, I started sending my stuff out to newspapers here in South Africa, and until somebody would bite. And then eventually one newspaper did bite, and for me that was just the greatest thing. Now at this stage I was not making really any money. Right, I just kind of left the corporate world. I got retrenched because what happened at that stage was smartphones were starting to enter the market. So there was a whole shift in the way cell phones were or the technology was changing, and I was very bored. And so I spent the next couple of years just drawing these comic strips and submitting them to newspapers, and bit by bit more newspapers would publish them, and for me that was a lot of fun. And then in 2007, if I'm boring, just let me know.
No.
And then in 2007 was where my first major opportunity occurred. So it was about 2 years, more or less 2 years after I started drawing professionally, if you can say that. And an editor of a very, very big newspaper here contacted me, and he said, look, somebody's been sending emails around with jokes in them. And I saw some comic strips in there, and I saw your name on the side, and I found your details. Would you like to draw for our paper? Like, okay, great. And that's what I did, and it was daily, and this for me now was the breakthrough. And then maybe about a year later, because it was still just random humor, it wasn't political, and I had no political ideology at all, anything like that. And he sent me an email, and he said, listen, have you tried political commentary? You have an opportunity. You're drawing for us. What if you attempted to make some comments about what's going on in the current affairs? And I said to him, I really don't know what to even say. And he said, well, and I've never forgotten this. He said, knock them down when they're up and lift them up when they're down. And that's such great advice. And I've never forgotten that, because think about it, it's good. It's good advice.
Yeah.
You if they're too arrogant and too high up the food chain, certainly punch up. Bring them down to grassroots level. But then don't go after them
when you're already done.
Yeah, you don't kick a dog when it's down necessarily. It depends on the dog. If it's Klaus Schwab, I'll happily keep kicking.
Toppers, hier een kleine onderbreking. En zoals jullie weten, in 3 jaar lang de Trueman Show onderbreken wij het eigenlijk nooit. Maar hier toch een kleine onderbreking met iets wat ik super belangrijk vind en waar we heel hard aan werken. Want, lieve vrienden, de Trueman Show komt naar jullie toe. Wij gaan de theaters in Nederland en België. En wel met het thema De Weg naar Vrijheid. Ik ben er super blij mee. Ik kijk er onwijs naar uit om jullie eindelijk allemaal te gaan ontmoeten. Dat de gasten jullie gaan ontmoeten en dat we er gewoon 1 groot feestje van gaan maken. Kijk even naar het filmpje en ik hoop jullie allemaal snel te zien. En verder heel veel plezier met het verder kijken van deze podcast.
Al 2 jaar lang vragen jullie ons of wij ook iets bij jullie in de buurt kunnen organiseren. En dit wordt nu eindelijk werkelijkheid. De Trueman Show gaat op tour, lieve vrienden. En in de maanden februari, maart en april zijn we te zien door de theaters in Nederland. En dat betekent dus ook naar de theaters bij jou in de buurt. Samen met de inspirerende gasten van de Trueman Show zullen we de weg naar vrijheid met elkaar gaan onderzoeken. Dit betekent een live podcast met de allerbeste gasten van dit moment. En uiteindelijk ook een Q&A waarin je de gelegenheid krijgt om vragen te stellen aan mij en de gast. Want wat betekent vrijheid nou voor jou en hoe kunnen we nou voor zorgen dat we samen vrijer kunnen leven? Door het samenbrengen van ieders individuele reis leggen we de puzzelstukjes samen. En verwacht daarom ook een avond waar je geïnspireerd raakt en waar verbinding met gelijkgestemden centraal staat. Samen lopen we de weg naar vrijheid en ik hoop jullie allemaal daar te zien, want we gaan er echt een feestje van maken.
Yeah, you don't kick a dog when it's down necessarily. It depends on the dog. If it's Klaus Schwab, I'll happily keep kicking. You know, if it's Bill Gates, I'll get my friends to come help me kick him.
Yeah.
And I've never forgotten that. And that advice stuck with me. And so then a few years passed and I started becoming very politically driven. And then I started being entered into big national competitions and all sorts of stuff. And then in 2011, I won my first major award, the biggest award you can win in this country. And it ironically falls under journalism, and I'm not a journalist. But I nevertheless won, and I had no idea that I would win. It was amazing. The awards happened in Johannesburg and all that. And then I kind of got accolades and more sort of lesser awards over the following years. And then I published my first book, I think in 2013, with Penguin, and then again in 2014. And then my life took a big dip in that phase between like 2014 and 2016, I suppose. For a few years, it was a very, very difficult time, just on a personal level. Very dark place, and just personal things that were happening. And then my life changed for the better, and I kind of got back on the horse, as it were. I said that in 2007, I had a big moment with the newspaper. So 2016 was another kind of big year for me. I now was in a relationship with now my current wife. My wife. my current wife, yeah. And then I've got another wife coming later on, We lived in a little seaside town called Mossel Bay. Beautiful little seaside town. And there's where I had what you would call a Damascus moment, where I kind of reevaluated like where I am politically, where I am ideologically, culturally, everything. And it was a beautiful, beautiful time. And that was when I then got like really aggressive about where I was going to go forward with my life. And I started becoming more independent at that stage, because I was now becoming very, very, not very, but I was becoming awake to mainstream media, establishment media, and how controlled it is. And
you were working for them at the time.
I was, very much so. But I started bit by bit finding roads out and finding new independent ways to obviously make money, but by drawing, political satire. And for a long time, I was, having a tug of war with editors and mainstream and all that sort of stuff. And then in 2019, I became almost fully independent. I had 1 or 2 newspapers and publications for whom I was still drawing, but I was now mostly being funded independently from much smaller operations, projects, organizations, whatever. And then I decided I'm getting a little bit bored I also want to chat about the ideas in my cartoons with actual people. And then I started a really crappy podcast. I didn't have all this kind of equipment, and and then I found myself enjoying it, and I found that it was helping me think about ideas for my cartoon work, and so they were kind of feeding into each other. And it wasn't regular. It was like once a week or once every 2 weeks or whatever. And then the whole COVID story occurred in 2020. And then I kind of realized, well, now I'm locked down in my home, so let me do it more regularly. And then I started buying better gear and started becoming more professional, so to speak, and then started getting better guests. And that's where we end up now. With now I've got a regular podcast with millions of downloads. My cartoon work is a lot less frequent than what it was, but it's I think that it's in a much better place now because it's fully independent. So I can draw what I like.
Yeah.
And so the quality for me is higher than trying to churn out something every single day. I can now spend a bit more time, so I'd maybe draw twice a week. And then in 2022, I think, I was approached by TNT Radio, which was a result kind of all the lockdowns and all this garbage that's going on, because the alternative media space, as you know, has been growing.
Yeah.
And
It's a good thing,
as a
right?
as a result of everybody waking up to the nonsense that's coming out of the establishment and the mainstream. And so now I essentially host a daily talk show on TNT. I do my podcast like twice a week or 3 times a week, and I draw my cartoons like twice a week or so. And that's a great place to be, and that's where I am right now.
Nice. Did your cartoons became more, because they were always in a sense quite controversial, eh? Like, because you were always trying. That's what I believe when I look at them, and I don't understand them all because they're obviously also about South African politics and stuff. But they were also always kind of controversial, right? But do you think they became more and more controversial the last 3 years, even so controversial that the mainstream didn't like them anymore because they were too much anti-establishment, maybe?
Yes, absolutely. The COVID era is a weird. It's a double-edged sword. On the one hand, it harmed a lot of people, and I don't mean the fake pathogen story. I mean what happened, everything around it,
The lockdowns,
and all that nonsense. It was very, 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 very destructive. But the silver lining is that it caused a lot of people to open their eyes, and it also forced a lot of people to reevaluate, to rethink what they think they know. I believe very little of what I believed in 2018, 2019. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like the world's
different ballgame.
Like 2020 is almost like the year zero.
Yeah.
And everything restarts.
Yeah.
The great reset, as it were. Okay, but like that for me is like a proper reset, because I start looking at things differently. And then you find yourself questioning everything, like everything. You know, everything you thought you knew, like whether it's I don't know, Earth, you know, being round or flat. I mean, I never thought the day would come. I never thought the day would come, right? That I'm going to sit down at my laptop and type in, is Earth flat? And I found myself typing that, and I can't tell you why I found myself typing that, but that's what I did.
Yeah.
And then you end up finding all these weird people who are actually amazing people. And I don't know what I believe. I know that NASA is full of theater. I understand that, and I'm not going to say I think Earth is flat, because I struggle also with that claim. But I certainly no longer blindly trust what I'm told.
Yeah.
Okay. And I have no reason to trust, and I don't think anybody should blindly trust, right?
No.
But then you type in stuff like, well, do viruses exist, or did the dinosaurs exist?
Yeah.
And you end up asking the questions that you never in your life thought you would ask.
Yeah.
But what's funny to me is I don't find that offensive at all. Like,
No.
a lot of people think, oh, well, you're just a nutcase. Oh, that's okay. You know what's funny though, is I'm in the best place psychologically, mentally, and to some degree physically that I've ever in my life been. All right, so I'm a little bit out of shape because I haven't gymmed for like a year. that's all going to change. I love getting in the gym. It's a great way to de-stress, right? It's just a matter of you need to get the motivation. I don't know if you gym or whatever, but
Martial arts, yeah.
Yeah, martial arts, exactly. But if you fall out of the rhythm, you got to find yourself back into that rhythm.
Yeah.
So that's my one weakness. It's just finding my rhythm to get into the gym. And also at the moment it's extremely hot.
Yeah.
So it's difficult. And I don't go to a gym. I have my own.
Oh yeah.
I've got my own like sort of prison style.
But that makes it even harder to do it.
Yeah,
I think.
But I do my own deadlifts and my own bench press and all that.
Yeah.
And I've in my garage because I don't want to go to the gym because it's just too much. It's too much of an effort.
Yeah.
And I like just walking into my own space like that. Anyway, the point is, I eat better. I take no pharmaceuticals at all for just about anything. I mean, I was on drugs in 2020. I was on antidepressants and all sorts of other stuff.
Shoot.
I was in a very dark place because the whole COVID thing really upset me, and I let it eat me up.
Yeah.
A lot of people didn't eat up, but I just looked at this and I thought this makes no sense. The whole thing. How can the whole world get locked down just coincidentally? Oh no, but you see, Jerm, the governments are they're looking out for us. They don't want this deadly virus to spread. Okay, when in history has the entire world been locked down? The only time I know that any country has locked its citizens down, I think, is the Netherlands, and I think that was in World War II. And I think that was a war. It was a response to the war. I think I might have it wrong, and you're welcome to double check me. But I think there was some sort of lockdown.
Well, they had I don't know if you had that in South Africa as well, but in the Netherlands, you were even way worse than it was in the Netherlands. In the Netherlands, you had at a certain point that you weren't allowed to go on the street after like 8 p.m. or so.
Here also,
yeah,
we weren't allowed to go out after 10.
Okay, yeah,
all right, and we weren't allowed to buy. I kid you not. Here in South Africa, during lockdown, we weren't allowed to buy fried chicken. We weren't allowed to buy open shoes. I'm not joking.
It's insane, eh?
And when I say fried chicken, I mean cooked chicken. We weren't allowed to buy pre-made chicken. All right? I can't believe I'm saying that.
Yeah.
They sealed off, I think, like tools for your garage. Like a drill or that sort of stuff. We weren't allowed to buy those things.
But you know what which I'm asking myself this question a lot, that because South Africa, I mean, for the people who never been, it's obviously like it's an awesome country, but it's also just a weird country in many ways. Like it's an extreme country, extreme this, extreme that. Everything is extreme, I find, in South Africa.
Yes, it's not just middle of the road, like Europe.
Nothing. Nature, like everything is harsh. Everything is real, right? That's what I always believe when I feel when I come to South Africa. But so what you also have, you're like a lot of people living in townships here, right?
Yeah.
And what I thought is because, for instance, Kalicha, with the big township in near Cape Town, 2.5 million people living there.
Yeah, something like that.
Something like that. I don't even believe that they really know how many, but at least 2.5 million. So a lot. Like, the government has nothing to say there, right? Like lockdowns and stuff. Like how will you lock?
They weren't locked down.
No, exactly. How can you lock down 8 people in a shack?
No, okay. So you're correct completely about South Africa being extremes. It really is. There are pros and cons to that. You have extremes whether you have very rich people and you have very poor people, but you also have extremes in the sense that the government thinks that it's a lot more effective than what it really is. It's very inept. It's very useless. And it really didn't lock down most of the country. People, as you mentioned, in Khayelitsha and pretty much most of the township areas around the country, they didn't care at all. They all live on top of one another.
Yeah.
All right. So if there really were a deadly virus,
they all would be dead now.
Yeah, but the virus is clearly racist because it didn't go anywhere near them. All right. They didn't wear masks. They didn't socially distance because they can't. And they just carried on with life. The people who complied the most are the middle classes, the middle to upper classes.
Yeah.
And I think that's something you would see around the world.
Yeah.
But the people on the extreme poverty side of things just really didn't care. I'm not sure about the super rich. They probably didn't lock down either.
No.
Anyway, but so For me, the thing is that the extremes is quite nice because then you can move. You've got a lot more space within which to move. It comes with its downsides also. That's why. I mean, in that movie with Leonardo DiCaprio, Blood Diamond, it's a great movie. It's a little bit sensationalized, but it's a great movie, and it kind of gives you a good idea to some degree of what it's like to live in Africa. He says that line, TIA, this is Africa. And it's a profound statement because there is a harshness about living on this continent. It's not for the faint-hearted.
No.
It is very different, and it's difficult to explain also if you've never been here. I guess to some degree it's like trying to explain living in India if you've never been there. It's also, I think, pretty extreme in many ways, but it is different. Yeah, it's lots of empty space, and then lots of clusters of people, like you just mentioned, in the townships, and then also wildlife, heavy temperature changes, and lots of chaos.
Yeah.
Lots of chaos, and you have to kind of navigate all of that. And things are broken, and things don't work properly. But there's also a magic about that. And if you aren't used to it, you'll struggle. I told you I was in Amsterdam a few months ago. I was on your side of the pond. Everything works. It's amazing. Everything works. It's fluid. And the buses are on time. Here we hardly have buses. The trams work. Everything is great. But I think that also can lead to laziness. And I think it can lead to complacency.
Yeah.
And it can lead to compliance. Because you start thinking less. You realize that the state is doing everything. And so you can start becoming distracted from things that matter. Because there's no need to think. And also hyper-individualistic societies like that, I think they degenerate.
Yeah.
When you see everybody walking around with these things on their head in the city, I think that's a problem. There's a disconnect that's being encouraged. And when everything is smooth flowing and when everything works, that's what happens. You lose a sense of community. And I think culture takes a knock also on top of that. So I think in many ways you have to weigh up the pros and the cons of the extremities that you talk about. And you also have to figure out to you, what are the things that matter? What are you willing to sacrifice? What are the things you're willing to gain? I wouldn't move from here, despite all the chaos and the crime and everything. It's still my home, and I know how it works, and so I'm happy in that kind of space.
That's it. You should, if you know how it works, because we, a lot of people, that's also what I think about South Africa and being here back. But also, people judge a lot, especially people from the Western countries, the Netherlands and other countries. They judge all those other countries. When I came back from Asia as well, I told a lot of people it's so, you still have a sense of freedom in those countries because everything is shit.
Yeah. Well, there's a correlation between chaos and freedom.
Yeah.
So, for example, I've got friends in Canada who want to come back here. They emigrated and kind of, they don't like the fact that they're in Canada anymore because it's too well governed, overregulated.
Yeah.
And the problem is when it's so efficient, everybody injects themselves with an mRNA jab. Because everything's centralized, and if you don't do that, you struggle to earn an income.
Yeah.
Here, because everything is broken, everything therefore is decentralized, and so you can get a speeding fine here, and it doesn't really matter because it doesn't affect anything else in your life. They can't clamp down on anything. They can't force you to get the jab. They couldn't lock down half the country. They can't enforce so much stuff. So you end up with more freedom. You can speak more freely here than you can, without a doubt, in Europe. There are too many restrictions on speech that are occurring from a tightly centralized system that is part of the technocratic agenda, by the way. It's part of Agenda 2030. It's part of sustainable development. This is what the EU is about. It's about it's about removing the sovereignty of the nation states right across Europe. It's about destroying the tradition, the heritage, the culture, and creating one grey zombie mass that blindly complies and just says yes. I think it sucks that you have no borders. You could just drive between countries. There's something wrong. There's something wrong with that. And it allows the inverse for people just to come in, which we know is happening in Europe. America is much the same. I mean, Yuri Bezmenov, former KGB operative, said in an interview ironically, 1984, with G. Edward Griffin. You must watch that interview if you haven't. Great interview. I think might be on YouTube, but it's definitely on Odyssey. And he said, back then already, 1984, he said America's shot. He said the country is being destroyed without a single bullet being shot. And it's a profound thought. And that's what happens when you allow technocratic agendas, when you allow globalist agendas to infiltrate at all the higher levels of governance and corporate life. You have way too much centralization, way too much state control. And what invariably happens is that you say, oh, democracy. No, it's a farce. There are no democracies. There aren't any.
No.
Because if there were, we wouldn't have had all the lockdowns, all right? So we are living in a very kind of theatrical, I don't want to say simulation because it sounds a bit too digital, but I think David Icke has a point when he says that there is a simulation, we are in a simulation, because to some degree, a lot of the stuff is just way too well planned.
Yeah.
A lot of it is by emergence, and I think a lot of it is accidental. But how do you go from COVID to Ukraine to Gaza? Also beautifully lined up. Imagine if Ukraine and Gaza happened at the same time. Like nobody would know which emoji to use in their status. Like I don't know, dude. Like
choose.
Like which one do I stand with? Okay, I stand with both Ukraine and Israel. And there's my little emoji. No, they were so. I don't know how. I don't know if it's purely by design or if it's a combination of emergence. But the point is that Ukraine ended COVID.
Yeah, sure, yeah.
It ended COVID. Nobody remembers COVID anymore. It's like it's 90s now, And then Ukraine was not going very well for the West. America was just losing completely. Putin is just ahead. He's a good chess player. And so then suddenly the attention got diverted to Gaza. And I don't know where that's going to go. Disease X. That might be the next big one. But it's this constant perma-fear, like permanent fear. And that keeps people compliant. It keeps people in a state of perpetual anxiety, as Matthias Desmond says, if you've got free-floating anxiety, you've got people then more willing to latch onto one another and then basically become, in many ways, totalitarian themselves, which is precisely why you have your neighbor reporting you for walking your dog during lockdown.
Yeah.
Insane. They would report us for driving at 10:30 at night when the curfew was 10 o'clock. How can you talk even about a curfew in the modern world?
Yeah.
So what I was saying is that you've got this technocratic infiltration that's happening. In many ways, it's a combination of not just communism, but it's technology, science, and communism and central control. It's a whole pile of things. That's the beauty of technocracy.
Yeah.
It's a whole pile of things. It's not one thing. But it's ultimately top-down central control.
Yeah.
And a lot of that is happening through centralized frameworks, and that's why America is imploding. That's why Europe is imploding, because they're allowing it. Now, coming back to Africa...
exactly. Don't you... How?
Well, in Africa, it's not working that well because the systems are so broken. Everything's chaotic and broken. They can try to some degree, but it's, as DiCaprio said in the movie, this is Africa. They're going to struggle. Africa will probably outlast a lot of the first world in terms of the technocratic agendas that are trying to be imposed.
Even though the ANC is still just as WF infiltrated as right? Yeah.
I mean, the ANC is completely useless, but that's a good thing.
Yeah.
I would much rather have a completely useless government than a highly efficient government. I don't want the Trudeau government here, because then it goes back to what I just said.
Yeah.
You end up with a better managed, centralized system.
Also, what I really like is that it's so obvious corrupt, like the ANC and everyone working there. It's so up with the load shedding, Ramaphosa coming into Cape Town, and no load shedding all of a sudden anymore. And it's so like
it's because
in your face.
Because that people often, people often think that the fact that we've got rolling blackouts. You said load shedding. That's a term that I think only we use. I don't know of any other country that says load shedding. So I'll say rolling blackouts so that people who aren't South African know what I'm talking about.
Because maybe maybe a lot of viewers, listeners, they don't even know that South Africa has they control the electricity.
We have a centralized electricity grid. Yes, that's quite correct. But here's the thing. People often think that the reason why we have rolling blackouts is purely because the government is useless. Well, no, our government is a lot more efficient, funnily enough, than a lot of other African countries. That's why we are the most powerful economy on the continent. Not because of the government, but we have a powerful economy in African terms. But our government is a bit better than, say, Malawi or Rwanda or Uganda or whatever, right? Now, people think that it's just the ANC that's causing our rolling blackouts. I beg to differ. There is evidence to show that there is infiltration from, again, foreign interests, technocratic interests, sustainable development interests. People keep forgetting this. The biggest agenda in the world is sustainable development. There's nothing bigger than that we know of. Okay, so sustainable development is the UN framework, which basically is Agenda 2030. It's the Great Reset. It's the New World Order. It's the Fourth Industrial Revolution. It's all those terms that different people use. It's all the same thing. Sustainable development is essentially the centralization of the entire world. It's putting all countries into a central governance structure. So a one world government of sorts. But when they say one world government, I like Ian Davis's argument. It's not one world government, but one world governance. So you create frameworks within which everybody agrees.
Yeah, just like the European Union, actually.
Correct.
Yeah.
So you've got Germany and you've got France, which are separate countries, but they basically listen to the EU because the EU is now essentially the government.
Yeah.
Now, sustainable development is the biggest framework in my mind. The biggest actual tangible vector towards sustainable development is climate change. There's nothing bigger than that, right? It's the biggest crisis. And I'm not saying it is a crisis. It's what they're saying is a crisis. In my view, there is no crisis. The climate changes and humans have absolutely negligible impact on the temperature of Earth, right? Yeah. In my mind, the most important variable with Earth's climate is that ball of gas that's above us, right? Like that is what controls everything. And then after that, you have clouds and volcanoes and ocean and all sorts of other stuff. Now, you've got sustainable development at the top, and then you've got their crises, which they are using to bring everybody into centralized control. If you can use climate change, which is invisible also, if you can use that
just like viruses.
If you use climate change, well, there we go. That's the other vector. I'll talk about that in a second. So you've got climate change as the major unifying vector under this framework of sustainable development. You've got buy-in from 200 countries, 190 countries, whatever the number is. Okay, all of them saying, yeah, we're going to tax. We're going to have carbon taxes. I don't know how you tax. I don't know how you tax people into changing Earth's temperature. The thought is ridiculous. But what they do under that is that they start demonizing nuclear, they start demonizing coal, which is how we survive in South Africa. Coal is our biggest base source of electricity. Once you attack that, then you can bring in the very unreliable solar and wind and all that sort of stuff. And it's extremely expensive, and it's a heavily funded lobby, and it makes a lot of money for the technocrats because it uses technology and all that. And it's very easy to control. It's way easier to control than the current setup. You got people buying into that fear of climate change. So already there's your one vector. The other vector, of course, is, like you say, viruses, or let's broaden that. Let's say health, disease. That is the other massive one now. The WHO is just driving this pandemic idea. Again, invisible, like climate change. You can't see viruses. You can't see what's going on. So suddenly you have to trust the authorities. And so therefore you have two major vectors of towards mass control and surveillance, because you bring in digital ID and a vaccine passport. Have you got your vaccine? Let's have a look. Yeah, okay, fine, you can travel. All right. Oh, but you can only travel so far because you've been using too much fuel in your car. So get rid of your car, use public transport, and then when you stop at your next destination, show your QR code with your vaccine status. So now you can't really pull that off here in Africa because people live very far apart. So another sustainable development plan is to push people into the cities so you have more control. But you're not going to win again because as you can see here in South Africa, people are far too scattered and people don't care about listening to the authorities. So it will work for the middle classes, but the majority of Africans are not middle classes. And I think there is a saving grace that's coming from the poorer classes in terms of our future. And I think in Africa, you've got a better chance of surviving Agenda 2030 than you do in Canada or in Europe or in many parts of Asia even, where it's very, very efficient. There's a sense of, in Africa, as you've probably seen, there's a very deep suspicion of authority. And in a way, it's a blessing in disguise. That's a long-winded kind of answer,
and also maybe that's the feeling that I get a little bit, is that people thought that everything would be different after apartheid, and now they see everything is getting worse and worse, and even way worse than before apartheid. It's a funny story. I was talking about the housekeeper in our house in Cape Town. And I was talking about, she was like, oh, I'm sorry, I can't do the laundry because load shedding. And I made a joke that, Ramaphosa left town, so now we have load shedding back. Yeah. And then she was, corrupt and blah, blah, blah. And then she told me, a black lady, during apartheid, everything was way better than it is right now.
Everything was working.
Everything was working. So I also somehow get the feeling that people are so fed up with how they hoped everything would change after apartheid, but everything was just getting worse and worse and worse.
You just reminded me, that's also the point that I forgot to make now a moment ago, but I was going to say, so with the rolling blackouts, why I believe that a lot of that is not purely incompetence and corruption. I think it's mostly driven by the climate change agenda. I think that our government has, and I know for a fact that our government has agreed to multiple, shall we say, resolutions to reduce carbon emissions. We are driven by coal, which is carbon emissions. So therefore, reducing the amount of output is therefore a reduction in carbon emissions. Rolling blackouts are exactly that. Let me ask you a question. If you have no control over your electrical grid and everything is just broken and it's falling apart, explain to me why I have an app on my phone that accurately tells me when I'm going to have no electricity.
Yeah, it is.
The rolling blackouts are very well managed.
Yeah, on the minute. On the minute they're managed.
Yeah, I can pull out the app right now. I'll tell you when my power is going off today, and it goes off at that time.
Yeah.
Now, So in other words, blackouts are very well managed for the most part. And that indicates to me, A, that it is by design, but also there are enough documents to show that South Africa has effectively and officially agreed to reducing emissions. There's a white paper that came out a few years ago, I think 2009, that said that by the year 2025, South Africa would reduce its carbon emissions by 42%. Now, if you consider the amount of rolling blackouts that we've had and the hours per day on average, I think that 42% is fairly achievable. So the previous CEO of the main electricity provider also himself said that South Africa needs to shut down its coal power. So I think that there's a combination here of design, like genuinely stopping people from having electricity to meet those sustainable development targets, and also emergence in the sense of that there is a lot of corruption and fraud and all that sort of stuff. So I think you got those two things together, and it does blur the clarity of what is going on. But I think it's not just the ANC being a terrible
And
government.
I think it's a really important argument to make as well, because I just told you in the Netherlands and Amsterdam there were some power outages last week, and I mean they're talking about power outages for a long time now, and that's what I always, when I come here, I always think this is the first country where they're trying to like make it normal in a way, and everyone here just accepts it also. But then that you live in a country. And I think it will be the same in the Netherlands as well, because when you take out, when you only are on like green energy, then you will never manage to power all those houses in the Netherlands, right? So this will be a future. This will be in the future. It will be the same as here. And now you live in a country here where you have like twice a day you can't use electricity for like 2-3 hours.
What? That's on a good day.
On a good day, yeah.
Last year we were having, I think, 8 hours per day of no electricity.
Jeez, yeah. But that's what I realized, that this will be the scenario in the Netherlands and in the Western countries.
We can give you tips.
Exactly. Write them down.
We can how to survive blackouts.
Yeah, but it's already happening. That's the thing, and it will happen in the future in countries like the Netherlands as well.
Yeah, and I mean this is part of, again, sustainable development, and everybody. It's weird. There's such a disconnect with so many people that I talk to. They just hate the ANC, and I, in no way do I like the ANC, and I've never voted for them, and I don't support them. But people here in South Africa just hate the ANC so much that it completely blinds them to the bigger picture.
Yeah.
And the bigger picture is that there is an international, a globalist attempt, an agenda, a framework, sustainable development, to slow down carbon emissions, and that comes from our coal power. And that's what they're doing. And this is not just us. Many countries are trying to shut. The only country that I know of that's really just giving the middle finger is China. They're like just going ahead full throttle, and good for them.
Yeah.
You know, the world needs to act like them, and they never get targeted anyway, funnily enough, by the UN, because the UN has learnt that China just, you know, they just don't care.
No, and also it's not super smart to mess with China.
No. But I think that once people realize that you've got these globalist agendas to homogenize the world, things become a lot clearer. But when you keep focusing just on the ANC or just on the local, just on the government, you miss a lot of what's going on.
Yeah.
And you've got to zoom out when you look at these things. Electricity and coal power are directly related to the carbon emissions and climate change agendas, directly. And South Africa doesn't act independently on these matters. They don't.
No.
Just in the same way that South Africa and all other countries did not act independently on the fake pandemic. They all acted in the same way. Every country implemented masks. Every country implemented social distancing. Let me ask you a question. Have you ever heard the phrase social distancing before 2020?
Nope.
I'd never heard of it either. Funnily enough, though, it was in a movie called Contagion. Came out in 2012. Have you heard of the movie?
No.
I think it was 2012, and my wife and I watched it during lockdown. You want the hair on your arms to stand up.
It's the plot of what happened, probably.
Dude. They mention social distancing in the movie. They mention, if I've got it correct, a coronavirus outbreak. And in the movie, they talk about lockdowns and wearing masks.
Cheers.
It's in the freaking movie, and I think it was even on Netflix.
Jeez.
It's right there.
A little bit of predictive programming.
A little bit of predictive. You can't tell me that was just coincidence, or maybe it was. But what a hell of a coincidence if it was.
Yeah. But I mean, they tried the whole COVID scenario a couple of times before as well, right? I can remember in the Netherlands you had was it swine flu or also a kind of corona thing? No,
yeah.
it didn't work.
And neither did SARS-CoV-1 work in 2003.
Exactly, there was already a SARS-CoV-1. But I thought, okay, that didn't work. But then I thought, okay, now maybe they're just testing. How will people react? They don't want to push it through. They just want to test a little bit, fine-tune, and then make it all happen a couple of years later.
And they just went berserk with this one.
Yeah.
The whole world. It still blows my mind. The whole world just did the same thing, and then you've got unbelievably dim-witted people saying it was just coincidence. What? How?
Yeah.
How does every country end up using masks, social distancing, the phrase, and they all do the same freaking thing?
Yeah. All of them, eh?
With little changes here and there, like we couldn't buy cooked chicken.
Or 1.5 meters or 2 meters.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the absurdity of the whole thing, and what makes me so sad, though, more than anything, is just that so many people bought into it. That's the part that saddens me. If people just said no from the word go, we wouldn't have had it going for so long. But it is what it is, and thankfully, a lot of us came out of it on top,
And also, I think it's a good thing also because just like you said earlier, it was just such a awakening for a lot of people. So I think I do believe we need to get a little bit more of the COVID situations for people to read.
Disease X.
Yeah, for instance, yeah.
And I mean, people are saying, I've heard people actually say, they're making a vaccine for disease X. Okay, what is disease X? No, I don't know. Has it arrived? No.
Don't worry, they already have a vaccine.
And people say this, like intelligent people. They actually say this.
Yeah.
But
don't you think, because what do you think of the whole Israel, Gaza,
okay, so
Palestine story?
So my position is I don't have a dog in that fight. So I'm neither a Muslim and I'm neither a Jew. So, and I'm not a citizen of any of those countries or those regions, right? So I don't need to get personally invested in it, just like I didn't need to get personally invested in Ukraine, Russia, etc., or any war that's happening anywhere. But I can comment, and I can have an opinion, and I certainly am more critical of the Israeli government, extremely critical of the Israeli government, because if you go and look at the history, so just for a very brief moment, I just want to just say, I understand that people will debate now what actually historically led up to where we are now. I tend to buy into the idea that the modern state of Israel is not biblical, because a lot of that comes up. I see these conversations happening all the time. It's not the same thing, and that's a conversation, an academic conversation that we can have another time. But there's not a connection between the two. The modern state of Israel, as best as I understand it, is essentially the creation of the British Empire mixed with Zionism, and we know that the Rothschilds, for example, were involved. We can even see the document.
The Belfort Declaration.
Yeah. Okay, and so on. So and the United Nations and all that. So there were globalists involved with the creation of the modern state of Israel. Now, were there people living there? Yes, there were people living there. There were Palestinians living there. That's just irrefutable. However, I'm not going to get into the details, because what I think is important is when you zoom out and you realize that Israel, in my view, is a proxy of the US. It's the foothold into the Middle East, because the US is part of the former British Empire. You can call it the American Empire, whatever, right? It's the same thing. It is losing its global stronghold. Now, again, these conversations always get derailed because you'll get someone saying, yeah, but the overall world is controlled by the same people, and so therefore the East and the West paradigm is non-existent. That might be true, but the reality is that there is still an East and a West paradigm. It's very obvious, which is why you're seeing, America versus Iran, or America versus China, or America versus Russia. I don't think that Biden and Putin are sitting, on WhatsApp going, okay, guys, let's just go to war and let's make the world think that we're opposing each other. I don't think. Firstly, Biden can't speak in full sentences, right? He's senile, and he's got a cabinet behind him. The frameworks, I think, align themselves to opposing each other. So you might have central bankers and you might have people on the top of the pyramid who've created the frameworks for this to happen, and they're benefiting, but the people below don't necessarily know. Like Putin might not know that he's being played, or Biden certainly doesn't know that he's being played. Trump might not even know that he's being played. To some degree, I think Trump is a bit more awake than other US presidents, but I don't think...
Isn't he an openly Zionist as well?
But I think he is a Christian Zionist, yes. But, he's awake to the climate change nonsense. So he's not like... It's nuanced. He's good on some things, bad on other things. Biden is just pretty useless on everything. Obama was pretty useless on everything. And Trump is aware that there's a deep state, for example. Now, I'm not saying I like Trump. What I'm saying is that you've got political leaders who are actors on a stage, and they are directors of that theatrical production. But a lot of the actors on the stage don't know that they're actors on a stage. That's what I'm trying to suggest. And so there is a real East-West paradigm going on. And so you have America clearly wanting to maintain its stranglehold as a superpower. We can see that this is imploding, just like the Roman Empire imploded. And as a result, America's way of dealing with things is to be aggressive, which is why it wants to create a war with Russia. It doesn't like the fact that Russia is a powerhouse. It wants to create a war with China via Taiwan. That's very obvious. And it also wants to create a war with Iran, I believe, through Israel. There's a wider war with Iran that America wants to create. And so therefore you'll have years and years and years and years and many years of just propaganda about Iran, about China, about Russia. And so we... I say in the West because I'm not sure if South Africa is considered the West or not. I think on a good day we'll say yes, we're the West, and on a bad day we'll say no, we're not the West. Because we're kind of schizophrenic. We were once part of the Commonwealth, so we can kind of say, well, yeah, we've got Western stuff around us, and so therefore we are. But because we're part of BRICS, we can go, well, no, we're not part of the West. I'm not. So it depends on who's looking. But you could say that the United States is using Israel as a proxy to get into the Middle Eastern control, and this oil and all that. So these are very real things. Now, it's a long roundabout way to answer your question. What I'm suggesting is that what's going on in Gaza is real. Netanyahu definitely wants to wipe out Gaza. He wants to flatten it, and he's interested in the Greater Israel Project and expanding Israel, which is one of the reasons why Israel has no defined borders. Right? It refuses to define its own borders. It wants to expand. It also wants to get to gas that's sitting just off the Gazan ocean shoreline. And people throw around the term Hamas. Have you noticed? Hamas, wipe out Hamas. Hamas seems to be like a catch-all phrase now for Palestinians or Muslims or something. I don't know, but it's
like everyone is Hamas.
Everyone's Hamas. So like if there's 30,000 dead Gazans, but you see they're Hamas.
Yeah.
Well, no, they're not all Hamas. Yeah, well, okay, they're supporters of Hamas. They're all terrorists. Like 30,000 terrorists. Okay. Now, these are very real things, and these might have been set up by the frameworks that have been created over the years. And so you're sitting with, if you zoom in very, very closely, you'll never solve anything and you'll never see the big picture. But if you zoom out slightly and you realize that there is an empire problem also with Israel being a proxy, I believe, of the US. And that's why America funds Israel, and it's very, very, very interested in all the affairs of Israel. It makes sense that Israel would want hostile enemies like Hamas, keeping in mind also that Israel partly created and funded Hamas. Okay, so that it could diminish the impact of the PLO and Yasser Arafat. Israel doesn't want a two-state solution. Hamas doesn't either. And Hamas has openly said that it wants to wipe Israel off the map. That's what Israel likes, because then Israel doesn't need to negotiate with a terrorist. You see, so Hamas is actually well positioned. If Yasser Arafat or if the PLO were governing Gaza, they'd be a lot more reasonable, and that Israel would be forced to negotiate. But now they don't have to. So now they can bomb, and everybody sees them as terrorists, and so therefore it's a good position for Israel to be in. Now, I don't know if that will ever be resolved. I don't know. I don't think anybody knows. But what I do know is that the American empire is quite happy, I think, with that situation, because it's allowing them to start pointing fingers at Iran constantly, and it allows them to start pushing troops and military into that region, which is what they're doing. So you've got this permanent threat of war. There's one of the other vectors towards global control is war. And war really only benefits the bankers and really only benefits the politicians, also the ones who are in power. It doesn't benefit people on the ground.
No.
And I said this to you before we started recording, and this is very, very important. What's happening in Gaza, in my view, has nothing to do with, or very little to do with, Jews and Muslims. All right? I believe that by and large, Jews and Muslims are very happy to live alongside each other. This is not a religious war. How do we know this? Well, I think there's 2 million Muslims in Israel who live happily there. There are Jews that live outside of Israel in other Middle Eastern countries like Iran. For years and years and years, they're happy. Peaceful. There are Jews and Muslims that live in Russia. Right? People, by and large, no matter what their belief system is, or their ethnicity or whatever, will by and large live peacefully alongside one another. Even here in South Africa, with all our racial tension, who caused that? It wasn't the people on the ground. It was the powers that be. It was the authorities. It was the government. It's always those higher up the food chain that create those conflicts. The media loves to create conflict. And it creates something that's a lot worse than the reality. What's going on in the Middle East is the result of authoritarians, technocrats, bankers, politicians, presidents, who are creating conflict where there doesn't necessarily need to be conflict. And I keep saying this, that what you're seeing there is an attempt to try and get control of that region, particularly by the American empire, and it's using Muslims and Jews as the chess piece. And they are legitimately fighting and bombing one another, but they've been put into that position, if that makes sense. So they're not necessarily aware. They're not looking at the bigger picture, because if you're in Gaza, the big picture doesn't matter at all.
It's just surviving.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. And it's so you got levels. You got levels of control and playing and manipulate. Wars are always like this. There's a lot of strategy going on.
But what do you think? Because that's obviously the thing that drives the whole, well, at least Israel, is the Zionist movement.
It's massive. But even worse than the Zionist movement, sorry, I'm bumping your microphone here.
No worries.
What's worse than the Zionist movement is the Christian Zionist movement. It's a weird cult-like ideology. I think there's like 70 or 80 million Christian Zionists in the United States. And a lot of presidents are Christian Zionists. Donald Trump himself is, I believe, a Christian Zionist, which is why I think he attempted to move the embassy from, I think it was Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. That was a big middle finger that he was pulling. And that was a terrible thing that he did, I think, because Jerusalem is also a sacred city for the Palestinians.
Yeah.
Right? So that was Donald Trump making a very, very, very provocative chess move. It was purely symbolic. Now, I've just lost my train of thought.
The Christian...
Yes, Christian Zionism. So Christian Zionism is weird. And it's largely based, I believe, from what I can gather, on a combination of British intel, Israeli intel, the Schofield Reference Bible, which is very influential in Christian Zionism, which then led to dispensationalism and the idea that Israel, the modern state of Israel, must be unwaveringly supported, blindly supported by Christians because Jews are the chosen people. And it says so in the Bible. The reality is that it doesn't say so in the Bible, and this is what happened from the Schofield Reference Bible, which is one of the most influential Bibles in existence. And it basically, about 100 years ago, whatever, a guy called Schofield, and he was funded by, funny enough, Rothschilds and other Zionists, to bring out normal translations of the Bible, King James or whatever else, but he made notes next to, so like if you open it, you'll see all these little references down the side and underneath and so on. It was that became extremely popular in the United States, and it sold in the millions and millions and millions. And variations of that ever since have been in distribution, whether it's this translation or that translation, but it's those notes. And
interpretations.
Correct. Yes. So he would say, well, this verse on this page means Israel. God is referring to Israel here. And if you read the verses and you didn't have those notes, you wouldn't think that. You would have to read the scriptures more. And I'm just talking about this because I'm trying to create the context for Christian Zionism, which I believe is strongly related to what I'm talking about right now. A lot of the funding for that came from British and Israeli intel. That's less important to the overarching narrative of dispensationalism, which is the idea that Israel is the chosen nation and Christians need to support it no matter what. And somehow this idea caught on, and it was published by Oxford University Press, and it made a lot of money and all that sort of thing, and it just swept the United States. And today you've got mega evangelical Christian church pastors on behind the podium with Israeli flags hanging behind them. How do you get to that point where the Israeli flag is more important than your own flag? Okay, so that's kind of weird. And you become so dogmatically blinded by this message that you will say that there are 30,000 terrorists and we must wipe them all out. And if it means wiping out Gaza and flattening it and rebuilding over it, that's it, because we are wiping out the terrorists. Why? Because we must stand by Israel. So it doesn't matter what happens. Anything, they can do anything they want and they'll be protected. It's just this weird ideology, but it caught on as it was designed to through us, as I said, British and Israeli intel. I think has got a strong connection behind it, and of course, the idea that Israel is this chosen nation that Christians must blindly support no matter what, and it has millions and millions and millions of people following this idea. It's not biblical. And I think that it's very divisive, very, very divisive. It interferes with your own nation sovereignty, for example, because it gets this idea of I don't know if there's a word, Israelism. It gets that idea infiltrated into your environment, and then that's why you end up with church pastors and preachers and generally the evangelical Christians proclaiming the message, the protection of Israel, and it's crazy how popular this idea is, and it dates back further than Jewish Zionism. I mean, that people don't realize that.
Really?
Yeah, it's like you got like 80 million Christians fighting the cause of 5 million Jews in a weird kind of way, because not all Jews are Zionists either.
No, a lot are not Zionists, right? Yeah.
Yeah. So and there's a difference between Zionism and Judaism.
Yeah.
And Israel. Okay, they're all linked, but they are different. You know, nobody that I know hates Jews. Like you don't hate a person who's a believer.
No.
A Jew, as in somebody who's either ethnically a Jew or follows the religion of Judaism. Why on earth would you hate somebody simply because of their belief, or the accident of their birth? Zionism is different. It's an ideology that anybody can adopt, and it's not really about Judaism. It's just about blindly defending the state of Israel. And then, of course, Israel is a modern state since 1948, and it has Christians and Muslims living in it. These are all citizens. So if I talk about Israel, I'm talking about the country, and an Israeli is a citizen of the country of Israel, just like I'm a citizen of the country of South Africa. And you have many different types of people living in South Africa. So saying Israeli doesn't mean Jew, and it doesn't necessarily mean Zionist.
No.
And these three terms get used so incorrectly all the time. And so you end up with this idea, which you can kind of understand, in which suddenly it looks like there's a lot of hatred for Jews.
Yeah. But that they managed that in almost a smart way, didn't they? That now all of a sudden, if you say something about Zionism, you're an anti-Semite.
Yeah, and I mean that's also garbage. Saying anti-Semite is the same thing as calling somebody a racist or a sexist. It's an empty label that is designed to shut down discourse. All right, that's all it is. So you're an anti-Semite. So the best way to handle that is to go, oh, okay, cool. Now what? You're a racist. Yeah, okay, cool. Now what? What are you gonna do? Okay, now that you've said it, you've thrown out your little label. You know, you have a little sticker also that says that, right? No problem. Sure. Now, can we get back to the talking point?
Yeah. Do you think that because a lot of people say that Zionism is almost everything what drives the whole one world governance and the whole agenda on everything is rooted from Zionism. Do you believe as well?
I've thought about this. I don't know. I think there could be some links, but keep in mind that the New World Order concept, that framework, is old. It's way older than Zionism. You could say it's thousands of years old. It's taken various forms. I'd certainly think that a lot of people at the top of a lot of these structures, these global organizations, these think tanks, or whatever, a lot of them are Jews. There's no doubt about that. But that's not necessarily where the danger lies. The danger lies is if they are Zionists. And I think a lot of them are. Having said that, I also think that there are a lot of Jesuits at the top structures. And I think Jesuits are also, they go back far. They're linked to the Vatican, and a lot of people keep ignoring the power, the historical power that the Jesuits have had, the Vatican, the Roman Empire, right? People very quickly forget about that entire history, because what happens is that people, it's almost fashionable to get so caught up. Again, you get caught up and you get distracted and you ignore the other stuff. You get caught up at the low-hanging fruit, and the low-hanging fruit is the Jews, all right? And as I just said, I think there are a lot of Zionist Jews and Christian Zionists in very high places. But this is also great for the Jesuits who just get forgotten about. For example, I think that the head of the BIS, which is the Bank of International Settlements, it's the central bank of central banks. He's not a Jew, and I'm not sure if he's a Zionist. I suspect he's a Catholic. I forget his name now. Augustine Carstens, I think it is. I'm not certain. I'm not 100% certain. But my point is that if he is Catholic, right, he's definitely not a Jew. And he's extremely powerful. And a lot of extremely powerful individuals are not Jews and not Zionists. But nobody talks about them. And I think that there are multiple groups of people that pull a lot of the world's strings. And it's not just the Jews. As I said, I think it's a low-hanging fruit. It's very easy to get caught up in that trend. And all it does is that it blurs some of the possible other truths that are just simply then in plain sight, but you're not seeing them.
Because it's funny you said that the Roman Empire has died, but then if you look at the Jesuits and stuff...
Has it actually died? Yes.
Has it actually died?
Yes, exactly. You've heard of the Club of Rome. Very, very...
They invented climate crisis, the whole climate thing, climate change by humans, right? Yeah.
Correct, yeah. So they created, you're talking about the... that sort of Malthusian model, limits to growth. So limits to growth is a paper based on Malthusian principles. It was developed by the Club of Rome and then put into actual mathematics, I believe, by MIT. And so yes, correct. So the Club of Rome are very much drivers of the climate change narrative. But people forget that there are other groups and actors involved because they just want to target the Jews or the Zionists the whole time. They are one piece in the puzzle.
Yeah, and the Jesuits, aren't they the black or the grey pope? One of them?
The black pope is what you're referring to. Yeah, correct.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, and nobody knows about that because they're all focused on the Jews.
Yeah, it is, eh? So what do you think that being from South Africa and living here and seeing how everything goes here, you just came back from the Netherlands actually, right? Like a month or two ago.
I was there in October.
Do you think that the countries like the Netherlands, like Germany, like the Western countries over there in Europe, they are like the eye of the storm, so to speak?
Yes. Well, I think
in terms of the agenda.
Yeah, I do think that. I think in some ways the head of the snake is Switzerland. That's the heart of the WHO and Davos and a lot of globalist agendas get planned there. I think no, the Bilderberg group I think is in the Netherlands, eh? Yeah, they because Bilderberg is in the Netherlands.
It's a hotel from the Netherlands.
Yeah, it's a hotel. That's where. But to answer your question, I do think Europe is a hotspot for Agenda 2030. Let me give you an example. I was telling you earlier. Amsterdam is a beautiful city, exquisite, and it's way prettier than Paris. All right, crap. Sorry, Paris is just—it's not the romantic city that the movies say it is. Amsterdam is way more beautiful. But Amsterdam it's perfect for a 15-minute city. It doesn't even realize that it's set itself up. Everybody rides a bicycle. It's tiny. You don't have to go anywhere because everything is on top of everything else. It's close. I think when we were there, the furthest we traveled away from where we were staying was 2 or 3 kilometers at most. You don't need to go any further than that. If you go further than that, you're going for a day trip. Just to get here, just to meet up with you, I think I drove in my car 20 kilometers, right? And I live close by, right? But when I was in Amsterdam, I didn't need to go further than 3 kilometers away from where I was staying. Everything was there. The 15-minute city is set up. All they have to do is say, "Let's do it."
Yeah.
And everybody will give the thumbs up and go yes, because they market it so beautifully that you don't need to live outside of where your bicycle can take you. And so,
you're already not allowed to drive in the city of Amsterdam with a diesel older than, I don't know, so many years.
You know what was so weird to me? This is a culture shock for me. So as you will know, here in South Africa, it's a little bit of a wilderness of sorts. Like, you can't really get anywhere unless you have a car. All right. In Amsterdam, people who ride bicycles have got more right of way than cars.
True.
You know, and they're aggressive about it.
Yeah, it's horrible to drive in Amsterdam.
A guy on a bicycle rode into me. But he was nice about it. He still apologized. But the funny thing was that I've never seen so many bicycles, and to have a car there is almost like it feels as if it's frowned upon.
Yeah.
Like, what's wrong with you? Why have you got a car? You know, dude, I've got the best bike. You know, and it's just it's culturally doesn't make sense to me, because you can't ride a bicycle here, really. You really can't.
No.
You'll get stabbed or shot, or your bike will get stolen or something. And everything's too far away from everything else. It's just too far. I mean, it's just too far. So 15-minute cities they're going to struggle with that here in South Africa, and probably in Africa as a general rule. Europe, it's set up. Paris, it's set up. You know, you don't need to go more than 5 kilometers away from anywhere.
No.
If you're in the center of Paris, it's done. 15-minute city set up. And I think that's the beauty of Europe. Everything is so close together that to have a 15-minute city and mass surveillance, drones, digital ID, everything works. So it's just easy to implement. Everything is centralized, easy to set up. You know, it's just a matter of rolling it out. And so I think it is definitely a hotspot. And I think the head of the snake, so to speak, is Switzerland. And I think that's where a lot of that stuff is being driven. Because Switzerland, in all its neutrality, has created a very, very toxic cesspit of globalism.
Did you hear our queen, Maxima, from the Netherlands? She was talking in Davos, and she was talking about the importance of digital ID. So for vaccine status, and she talked about it a week ago.
They love it.
The queen.
Yeah, they love it. More importantly, I love how you said Davos. Sounds fancy. With a silent S. Yeah. Like, I'm common, dude. I'm from Africa. I just say Davos. Like, well, no, I've got Davos.
Davos. Yeah, a little bit of French still in there. Right?
You know. But yeah, here in Africa, we're low class, so we just say Davos. There's no silent S.
Just Davos.
But yeah, I mean, it's a good point. Because what happens is this: I don't think they necessarily are indoctrinated to speak like that. I think they genuinely think it's a good idea. I know people who think that these are good ideas. They really do. They go, Jerm, you're just paranoid. What are you worried about? You got nothing to worry about. I mean, they're not going to come after you. You know, if you're not doing anything wrong, you know, what have you got to worry about? It's efficient.
Nothing to hide.
You got nothing to hide. You just scan your code and you can get on the bus or whatever.
Yeah.
And it's packaged as a very nice, warm deal. And in many ways it is. I was telling you earlier that, you know, I don't like carrying cash. I know that cash is king because it can't be tracked and traced. You know, if you and I do a deal under the table here, nobody will know what we're dealing in.
Yeah.
And despite the fact that cash is fiat, and I have my own tug of wars there because it's government monopoly money, but I know that I can still do a lot with cash, right? And it's unknown what those transactions are. But I don't like carrying cash. It's just a mission. You know, it makes your pocket thicker.
Yeah.
You know,
I need to go to the bank.
Yeah, and you got to go find an ATM and all that sort of thing. It is much better just to, you know, tap your card or tap your phone or something to that effect. So I've got this personal tug of war because I do like convenience, but I also know that convenience isn't always good. However, what if you could tap your phone, but you're tapping crypto, and that's decentralized? So I know you and I were chatting about this earlier. I'm not sure where I stand on that. I'm conflicted because I love the fact that crypto, like Monero, for example, is very decentralized and nobody can pretty much do anything with it. Like Bitcoin, you might be able to, to track and trace it. And I do agree with you. I do think about the origins of Bitcoin. Was it an Intel psyop to prepare us for CBDC? Who knows? And that in itself could also be the psyop. Like, we just don't know.
No. Isn't that a good thing also? This, like, living in this era now, we're like, we thought we knew it all. But if you all strip it down, we probably don't know that much.
What I do think is this. I think cash is a good idea, and I think use cash. If you want to use cash, I think use cash where possible. It's certainly easier to hide your transactions and maintain a degree of privacy. I'm suspecting that I'm going to start leaning more and more towards cryptocurrency in the coming years, because I just don't like carrying stuff on me like that. And it's like saying, gold, and I'm a big fan of gold and silver. Dude, do you want to carry gold on you? No, it sucks. It's heavy and it's clunky, and so that's why you have then cash, which was supposedly the IOU, linked to precious metals. It was the standard. Of course, that's all done away with. So cash is pretty much just money out of thin air,
paper. And
this is why I'm conflicted with the idea of using cash, because it's also money out of thin air.
Temporary solution, just that it stops everything from getting worse, probably, but it's no solution for the long term.
Yeah,
cash.
so it's this weird sort of circle. It's almost as if using cash it's just slowing down the inevitable.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's what I think as well.
Yeah, it's just slowing it down. That's
the money
all.
system is fucked either way.
No, it's broken. Yeah, it's completely broken. So where possible, focus on your privacy, and then I think that way, like if you're using Monero or any of these cryptos that are pretty privacy orientated, I don't know. I don't think they can get into that stuff. I don't think Intel can get into that stuff. I think the guys are ahead of the game on this. So let's pretend, even if it was a psyop, Bitcoin was a psyop, well, you could argue that it's backfired because of all the derivatives.
Mm-hmm, yeah. Yeah, that's what we were talking about earlier, right? Like the fact that internet, that they
it was for the intelligence.
Sure, that's what I believe as well. At a certain point, there was internet. All of a sudden, bam, everyone is starting to use it, and there's more control. But also for us, a way to make this kind of conversations and still bring it into the public. So
yes.
Yeah,
and I think there's a meta conversation that I've been having a lot of lately, and that is the world is not binary. This is the problem with many on our side, right? The whole world is binary. It's 1 or 0. That's why I take exception to certain commentators or pundits who say that everything is by design. No, because if you say that everything is by design, you're completely removing the idea of human nature. Human nature is very erratic, and human nature is biological. And it goes outside of the realm of control.
It's bigger.
It's much bigger.
Yeah.
Human nature is why it's very difficult to control loads of people. Because you can't control... The only thing you control is bots or androids. Okay, so that's why you want transhumanism, so that you can make people more compliant. By making people more compliant, you're lessening human nature. Human nature is what's keeping us free in many ways. Human nature desires the best outcome for humans, okay? And the best outcome is not being enslaved. And the best outcome is wanting privacy and all those sorts of things. So we will always innovate and find intuitive ways to get around the things that are trying to suppress human nature. That's why when people say, everything that's happening right now, let's just pretend, let's say that COVID to Ukraine to Israel, those things are completely by design. maybe. But I'm more inclined to believe that there's a degree of human nature involved also. I think you certainly can create frameworks under which all these things, like sustainable development, it's a framework, but not, and you might get a lot of buy-in, but you also won't. You can't force everybody to use solar panels. Or you can force them, but you're going to end up with a disaster situation. You have to realize that we are thinking beings. And it's because of that ability to apply nuance, that the world is not 1 and 0. It's not black or white. There is a lot of gray. The further away you get from your personal being, the more gray it gets. So in other words, like right now, I can tell you that I believe in the family. And this is a fairly binary position, a 1 or 0, right? Family 1, no family 0. There's no in between. I also can tell you that I think rape is a pretty bad idea. I've got a binary position on that. I don't think you can make a case for rape, right? In any circumstance, really. That's binary. But the further away we go, like Gaza, now I can have a nuanced position because it doesn't affect my human nature. It doesn't affect my immediate environment. It doesn't affect my family immediately. It might have repercussions by way of, I don't know, increased prices on, I don't know, whatever, oil, who knows, whatever. Okay, but that's geopolitical. That's not based on you waking up in the morning and how you approach the world and how your human nature and your desires and your meaning and purpose. It doesn't affect that. And so those things can be very value-driven and very binary. But the further away they go from your nucleus, I think the more nuanced and grey they can become. Your sovereignty as an individual is driven by nuance and a human nature and there are lots of things. We are not androids. We can't operate purely in a binary system. That's why I think that the world is very nuanced. It's okay to have nuanced positions. Here's another way of thinking about it. We were talking about Donald Trump briefly earlier. I like Donald Trump. Generally speaking, I like him. Now, I'm not American, so I don't have a dog in that fight, right? But I do kind of like some of the stuff that he says. But I don't like some of the other stuff that he says. I don't like his sort of Christian Zionist position. I do like his position on climate. So now what? I've got different positions on the same person. Well, that's okay because that's nuance. Does it mean I think he's a hero? No, I don't think that at all.
Does it just agree with him on some points?
I agree with him on some points and I disagree with him on others.
Yeah.
Let's talk about somebody who's way more of an enigma. Elon Musk. I have no idea what to make of him. All right? I find him intriguing and yet dangerous. For me, he's like polar opposites because he clearly has made Twitter, X, a better social media environment. There's no doubt about that. That's demonstrably the case. Does it mean it's a free speech platform? No, it doesn't mean that because he took down one of my tweets recently, or not he personally, but the platform did. And there are lots of people who get censored and banned and suspended and all sorts of stuff, right? But it is better than what it was in 2020, right? So he has done a good job in freeing it up, as it were. But I don't like other projects of his.
But don't you believe that that's the feeling that I get with Trump and also with Musk, is that feed the people who are critically thinking, who are differently thinking, who want it differently, feed them some heroes, so that they'll say, "Oh, Musk is a legend," or "Trump is a legend," and he'll come and fix everything for us, just to keep us quiet or distracted, maybe, or hoping that someone else will save us from this mess, and prevents us from actually doing something about the mess, by just hoping those guys will fix everything for us.
Yeah, I've seen that argument used a lot of times, and I get it. It's a very cynical position to have, though. very black-pilled position, because what it's suggesting is that they're essentially bad people, and I don't think it's entirely fair. I think Donald Trump is a blockhead. Okay, he genuinely is a blockhead. I don't think he's stupid, but he's a blockhead. Like he was, in my view, completely wrong on the vaccines. Okay, Operation Warp Speed, but now it's nuanced, because I don't believe that he sat around a table with his advisors and said, "I'm going to try and kill Americans." I don't think so. I think what happened there was he was outplayed. And I've done a couple interviews on this. I think that he was outplayed by the deep state, by the CIA. I won't get into the details, but people who surrounded him very quickly in late 2019, early 2020, who knew this whole thing was going to play out. They surrounded him very, very quickly, and because he's a blockhead, because he's self-important and a narcissist and arrogant and all those sorts of things, I don't think he thinks about viruses. Okay? I don't think he thinks about stuff like that. He thinks about China. I think that's all he thinks about, right? And when they surrounded him, they said, "Look, this is deadly virus, and if you don't act now, you're going to have millions of dead Americans, and you're going to look like a terrible president." And I think he said, like, "Okay, what do I do?" But he was already by that stage surrounded by the wrong people who were playing him. The CIA, I think, was involved, and we know this because Matt Pottinger, who's a CIA operative, pretty much put Deborah Birx into the White House to head up his corona response team. So we know that the CIA was immediately involved. Anyway, without getting into the complexities, what I'm trying to say is that it's a combination of factors. The fact that he probably wouldn't have wanted to have locked down the United States because he's a businessman to a large degree, and he would never have wanted to be the president to destroy the American economy. But I think he was outplayed on that one. I think, for example, his position on Israel is just based on his own upbringing.
Yeah?
He's a Christian Zionist, and I think he just got caught up in that whole world. I don't think he sat there thinking how he's going to make the world hate him. I think he just believes that, like millions of Americans do. Other things are more strategic, like climate change. He doesn't believe all that nonsense. That's a good thing. That's a very good thing. What am I saying? What I'm saying to you is that, again, it's not binary. He's not a hero, but I don't think he's Satan. You know what I mean? He goes to bed at night and he thinks about things. He reads books, whatever. I think he reads books. I don't think Joe Biden reads anything
Anymore.
Yeah, I don't even think he talks. He just goes to bed like,
Do you think he's a clone though?
And he gets fed. I've wondered that also. I've seen some weird photos of him and they don't make any sense. And I don't know. I think if he were cloned, the only thing that I could buy into that, but how do you get his voice so good? His voice does sound like his voice from when he was younger.
True.
That's the one thing that I'm not quite sure. But then again, you get very good voice artists, so who knows? But I mean, Elon also. Now, the reality is this. You don't, and I'm trying not to be super cynical. That's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to also give people some benefit of the doubt because of human nature. I'm trying to give people some good. I don't want to just say that they're outright evil no matter what. But the reality is that you don't become Elon Musk just by chance.
No.
Okay, you don't get to that position in the world. All right? Just by sheer business.
No.
It doesn't work like that.
No.
All right, you're allowed to get to that position and you're put there. There is a little bit of luck, I'm sure, involved and all that sort of thing. His positions on things, I think a lot of them are genuine. I think he genuinely does believe that he's doing a lot of good for climate change. So I think his position on climate change is rubbish. But I think he genuinely believes it, if that makes sense. But I also think he knows that it's a good money-making industry. I think he knows that he can make a lot of money from renewable energy, from electric cars and all that.
Feeding into the story that...
And feeding into the story also.
Yeah.
So I think he genuinely... Okay, let me rephrase it. I think he genuinely believes that he's done a lot of good environmentally. But I also think if he goes to bed at night and he thinks about it, I think he knows that humans are not really changing Earth's climate. Mm-hmm. But he sees what he's doing. If it makes sense, he sees what he's doing as a morally good thing, and that he'll be remembered in the future for. I think he sees himself sort of as a type of what's that dude from Iron Man?
You mean the Robert Downey Jr.?
Yeah, his character Tony Stark.
Tony Stark. Yeah.
I think he sees himself as a bit of a Tony Stark. I don't know what he thinks about other stuff. I don't know what he thinks about microchips in your head and all that. I think that putting your faith in Elon is a bad idea. All right. So the way I see him and approach him is simply he runs a social media platform. And if I put all my eggs in that basket, I'm going to end up getting disappointed. All right. So I just use it to exploit it for my own gain.
That's a good way.
And I have Telegram and other places. But I do have a soft spot for Elon because he's from my side of the world. You know, he's from here.
Yeah.
And deep down inside, I'm kind of hoping. I'm just hoping that there is good in him. But I also know that you don't get to where he is. You don't ban Kanye West like he did.
No.
For just no reason at all. Kanye West knows stuff.
Yeah.
No matter what anybody thinks of him, Kanye was onto something before he got suspended. And it wasn't what Elon said it was.
No.
Elon said that it was anti-Semitism or something like that.
Yeah, also, yeah.
And that's the other problem again, is that Elon is caught up in that world, Zionism and all that nonsense, which does feed now into what you were saying about the control mechanisms coming from those sorts of people. And I think you certainly are on point with a lot of that stuff too.
Yeah. You said something beautiful just earlier, which I really noticed during my trip here in South Africa as well, is that the whole nature aspect of the world or actually everything driving is that the elites think they need to get nature out of us and try to get us in that robotic kind of state of mind so that we comply and the whole agenda will work out. But what I, especially being in South Africa, noticed, because nature is still such a big part of living here.
And the sun,
nature, everything is, but there's such something bigger driving us, and that is nature or universe or God. I don't care how you call it. And that like, if we can tap into that, if we can see that is bigger, and that's why I have a problem with the Netherlands, with Germany, with those countries, because nature, the aspect of nature is already taken out of the country almost. So being here, it makes me realize that like there is something bigger than us. It's nature, and our nature will always prevent us thinking prevent us moving in a direction that the elites want us to move.
Well, yeah. I mean, so I mentioned human nature, and you've just mentioned nature.
Yeah.
I mean, I think those are big parts of what makes us happy. There's a reason why being in the sun makes you happier than being in the rain. You know, the sun is good for you. The elites hate that. They want you to be indoors. That's why they locked us down. That's why they're constantly telling you to be indoors. That's why they say, wear sunscreen. Right?
Yeah.
Stop the sun from touching your body. Put on sunscreens, put on sunblock. Block the sun. Wear sunglasses. Block the sun. You know, the sun is your enemy. And stay indoors. Don't go into the sun because you'll burn. And if you burn, you're going to get cancer. They don't want us being in nature. They don't like human nature. They don't like nature. And I think if you get caught up in the realm of binary thinking, you are falling into the trap of ignoring human nature. And if you get caught up in the trap of artificial, well, everything, you miss out on the sun. It is extremely true what you're saying. If you are detached from nature, if you don't see birds, if you don't see the grass, if you don't see trees or animals, And you spend a lot of time just on your phone, on your devices, virtual reality, and you start admiring the beauty of nature. Oh, look at this picture. Look how beautiful nature is. But there it is right there. But you're looking at it on your phone. I think that's where they want you. They want you caught up in that thing. And what's the next step? Well, you put on those goggles. And before you know it, you're living in a world 9 hours a day behind goggles, and your skin is pale because it's got no sunshine on it. You're unhealthy, and you have to take off the goggles to eat. And at some point you're going to end up with a system where you can wear the goggles, and you'll have some sort of pipe connected to your arm so that you can get food, and that you'll have something connected to your genitals so that you can pee, so that you don't have to take off the goggles. And at that point,
You're the Matrix.
Yeah, at that point, just give up. Just like give up, throw in the towel. Let me tell you something quickly. I know that you're here, but you're not here for that long, so you must come back. You need to go to. I know you were at a game park, but that's not a game park. You need to go to a real game park. Go to Kalahari or Kruger National Park, the two incredible parks that are here. And go camping. All right, don't stay in a chalet. Sleep in a tent, or at least in a go glamping. Glamour camping. And just lie there at night under the stars and listen to the sounds. Listen to the sounds of the animals and the birds and all that. Well, you won't hear the birds at night, but you know what I mean. When we were in the desert a few months ago, my wife and I, we were in Kalahari, which is part of the Kalahari Desert, which is just north of South Africa, between Namibia, South Africa, and Botswana. It's very, very hot, very dry. And the animals, they deserve to be there because that's harsh. And we got woken up at about 4 a.m. by a lion. It was walking around our tents. Our tents were, you could call them glam tents. Okay, they were slightly sturdier than the normal tents, but there was a lion nonetheless. And we had to put, the day before, we had to put these metal grids against the side of the car, the 4x4, because the lions come and they bite the tires, and so they pop them and then you can't drive. That thing roared at 4 a.m. And if you ever want to feel alive, that right there is the way to do it. There's nothing that I can explain to you that will make a sound like that go through your body and suddenly make you realize, I'm living. It is the most powerful, intimidating sound. And I know that I've said that a man can't become a woman. However, at 4 a.m, when a lion is close by and it roars, I can guarantee you're going to become a woman, right? Every part of you that says I'm a male disappears. That thing is, the point that I'm making is that the elites don't want you to experience it. They don't want you. You must look at it on a screen.
It's humbling, isn't it?
It is so humbling. You also realize what's important to you just in those few moments, And then the sun comes up, an hour later, and you just look out, and it's just incredible beauty. That, for me, is one of the major essence of life, and what you just said a moment ago about nature. They want you in a city. How do you experience that in a city?
You won't.
No.
Do you think that it's part of the solution to
nature?
Yeah.
Yes. 100%. That's why I said to you earlier, before we were recording, that if you ever wanted to leave Europe, as crazy as it sounds, Africa is a good destination. Because I think that Africa will be buffered against due to a number of reasons. Agenda 2030 stuff, sustainable development will struggle in many African countries. They just won't get it right for a long time to come. So while Europe is imploding with its cultural wars and its climate wars and all those sorts of things, you'll still in Africa, you'll still know what a woman is. You'll still hear wild animals. You'll wake up to the sun. And despite the fact that infrastructure is broken all over the place, you'll still feel quite free.
And alive, maybe.
And alive, yeah. In its own way. But you can't explain that unless you're here. It's very difficult to explain. There is something about being here that is its own magic. And in no way I'm not trying to make this place sound amazing. I'm not saying that at all. You know, it's difficult. I've been a victim of crime many times. I've got family members who've been murdered. Right? How often does that happen in Europe? It doesn't happen very often. You don't hear have you got family members who've been murdered?
No.
Yeah. You said right at the beginning of the conversation that here, living here or being here is extremes. But that's the point. It's the extremes. And it's that moving around within those extremes that makes it, I think, exciting and you feel alive. And no, for those who are listening to me talking right now, no, there are no lions walking around outside, right? It's not that bad here, okay? It's not like that. You know, the wild animals are in parks. Because Americans like to think that we have elephants walking in the streets.
Yeah.
You know?
Maybe a baboon.
We definitely have those walking around. You here in Cape Town, you see lots of them.
Yeah. But it's nice, eh? It's what I've been thinking the last couple of weeks as well. The answer is, it's maybe cliche, but the answer is nature. And being in a country like South Africa, and it doesn't have to be South Africa, but being in a country like it, it makes you feel what life is about. And it's not easy, but I think life isn't supposed to be easy.
No, I don't think it's meant to be easy. And just going back to now when my wife and I were in the Kalahari Desert, the story of the lion. You know, we were obviously in a so you have camps, obviously. You're not just randomly sleeping somewhere, right? There are certain designated camps, but they don't have fences. That's why the lions and the animals can come into the campsites, which is why at night, you know, there's a ranger who stays there and he checks that everybody is inside, because that's when the animals, the nocturnal animals, particularly the lions, and whatever, walk around. There is something spiritual that goes on there too. And you don't get that when you're so distracted by technology and Hollywood and internet and everything. You know, we were in this camp, it was full. And I think there was a grand total of 6 people. And that was considered full, right? There was no space for any more people there. It was us so 6 of us and I think the ranger. And no cell phone signal either. Nothing. So we had like 2 or 3 days of just no cell phone signal at all. And it really, really tests you because you can't send a WhatsApp, you know, or something. You can't check your email. And it shows you also, it makes you realize where we have arrived. And at 4 a.m, you wake up to the sound of a lion. It's incredible. And then the sun starts coming up and then you make coffee and there's no sound, and it forces you to contemplate life.
Instantly.
Yes, it forces you, you know, and you see some animals walking around, they're coming to drink water and that sort of thing, and in that moment you realize, okay, what is really the meaning of life here, and am I just a random result of stardust? Or is there something bigger going on here? But you don't experience that when you're constantly stuck in traffic and noise of the city and that bell of those trams that you keep hearing in Amsterdam, that sound, which is normal if you live there, but was completely abnormal for me. I had to I kept hearing this bell, that's that bell sound all the time, like every 30 seconds, you know? And in all that noise, you're not contemplating life. No. You're not contemplating what's important. You're just churning the cogs of the machine. And that's where they want you. And then they make it more busy and they keep bringing in more stuff. And then they enclose it as a 15-minute city. And then they bring in digital ID and everything's digital. And then you have no idea what the sound of a lion is, in a short space of time, and you don't know what it's like to feel the sun coming up and having no sound or distractions. And that's essentially what I'm saying, the meaning and the beauty. And I think that right there is something that the elites hate.
So the solution for everything. Thank you very much, man. I think there's no better way to close off this conversation in this podcast, eh?
It's been an absolute pleasure.
Awesome. Thank you, man. And we'll keep following you, eh?
And I'll keep following you.
Nice.
Sounds all creepy, but we'll follow each other.
And thank you guys for watching and sharing, and see you guys soon again. Ciao.